Welcome to the Timescales interviews.
Welcome to the Timescales interviews. Please put down your baseball bats.
I have an apology for you. I'm very, very sorry, Rory, that I beat up that Dalek with a baseball bat. It was very naughty of me, I know. Will you please say that I'm very sorry to Colin and ask Colin to pass on my message to the other Daleks, his friends?
Welcome to the Timescales interviews. Today I have a very special guest from Skaro, Colin the Dalek. Hi Colin, how are you today?
Good evening. It is wonderful to see you.
Very nice to see you as well. It's not very often that I have a conversation with the Dalek, but I do have a few questions for you today, if you don't mind.
Daleks do not do conversations normally, but I am not a normal Dalek.
Okay. And the first question is, why do you exterminate?
It saves time. People ask questions, people talk. It is far faster to simply exterminate.
Okay, so you would say it's efficient.
Yes.
Okay, and the next question, how many balls do you have? And that, of course, would be the hemispheres on your case.
My initial reaction was that was very personal and rude. However, I have 56 of them. However, the Ogrons sing about Davros only having one ball, but this is clearly empirically incorrect, so I exterminated them.
Okay, very good. And the next question is, was Peter Cushing's doctor canon?
The Peter Cushing cannon? Is this a Time Lord weapon we have not yet discovered? We tracked the Doctor through the multiverse. Tall, short, old, young. Filmed at Shepperton Studios or animated at Cosgrove Hall. He is still our enemy.
Okay, very good. And the final question from me, while Daleks aspire to rule the universe, going upstairs was always a major issue. Why did it take so long for the Daleks to learn how to elevate?
Why did it take so long for humans to discover bungalows? There is no need for stairs. We have always elevated, but battery life was limited.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And now I have a few questions from my own small humans. The first is, are you evil?
Evil? We have been labeled as evil on DVD releases and 1960s recreations of our adventures. Daleks are not evil. We are clear in our quest to improve the universe.
Okay, very good. And the next question is, are you an alien? And if so, what planet are you from?
I am not the alien. You are. We are the masters of Earth, but our home planet Skaro, which may or may not be in existence at the present, is my home planet.
Okay, very good. So Skaro may or may not be in existence at present. Do you have...
about the continuity at present?
You're not the only one, so we do have that in common. Do you have any hobbies, or do you like to make anything?
I enjoy knitting, watching kitten videos on YouTube, and going for walks on the beach with small humans.
Okay. And do you like ice cream?
Yes.
Okay. Do, do you
My
enjoy?
favorite preference would be raspberry ripple.
Okay. And do you enjoy being a Dalek?
I can be nothing else. It is part of my mutant nature and my programming. However, if I could be anything else, I would be a lumberjack.
You would like to be a lumberjack. Okay. Well,
Yes.
wouldn't every Dalek?
We
The
would.
next the next question is, do you drink water or do you eat anything?
I require oil and static electricity and occasional holidays at Center Park.
Okay. Do you require oxygen?
No, there is no requirement for oxygen. It is only to keep you all alive until we have exterminated you.
Well, wouldn't a good way of exterminating all humans be to deprive all of them of oxygen?
But where is the fun in that?
Okay. And what is your favorite color?
Red. But according to Terry Nation, I cannot see red.
Okay. So according to Terry Nation, you cannot see red?
In the 1966 Dalek Annual, he clearly states that Daleks cannot see red. And yet on the very next page, there is a red Dalek. He is a commander. So presumably he is invisible to us. This man is a fool.
Okay. Okay. And do you like to play games?
I like to play games with the two small humans that I live with.
Okay, fair
We
enough.
play hide and seek, locate, destroy.
Okay. And do you have any toys or do you like to play with toys?
I have small humans. There is no need for other toys.
Okay. And finally, what is your favorite thing in the universe or multiverse?
My favorite thing in the universe or multiverse are brown paper packages tied up with string.
Okay. And the final question, do you love your family, the Dobsons?
They have been very kind to me. Since arriving on this planet and being stranded at Coal Hill School in the 1960s Earth time, I have managed to become more like the humans. I worked at Coal Hill as a dinner lady through the 1960s and 70s. I was then neglected in a garage in Worthing until the family came and rescued me. Now I am their house Dalek, and I do cooking, cleaning, and a small amount of educational input.
Very good. Colin, it was really nice to meet you today, and thank you very much.
You're welcome. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Welcome to the Timescales Interviews. I'm Grego, your host, and today I have two very special guests from the United Kingdom and Skaro, Andy Dobson and Colin the House Dalek. Hi, Andy. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. It's evening here in the UK. I understand it's breakfast time for you guys.
Yeah, it is. We're just starting breakfast. We're looking at a little bit of rain today, which is very rare for this part of California. So that's a nice thing coming. It looks like the sun's going down there.
It is. It's in fact been sunny for the last couple of hours, but all of this week has been raining, which is not unusual for the UK.
Okay.
I've got floods and all sorts of things all around our area at the moment, but hopefully the rest of the week will improve.
We'll send some of that rain over here.
Will do.
So you are, what part of England are you located in?
So we're down on the south coast. So we live in Worthing. The nearest big city to us is Brighton. So for any of your viewers, listeners, if they can picture London, draw a straight line going straight down to the coast and then slightly west from there. So we're
Okay.
about a mile from the beach.
Nice. I have heard that that is a really beautiful part of the country right there.
It is. It is. We're in it's a relatively small coastal town. Lots of theatres, nightlife, and restaurants. And over the years, it's got all sorts of Doctor Who connections as well. William Hartnell lived here in the late 1930s, just on the outbreak of war. And Sidney Newman retired here, the original kind of commissioner of Doctor Who, and one of the people that came up with the original ideas. He retired about 2 streets down from where we live.
Really?
Yeah, he retired there in the late 80s. Much to my surprise, we only found that out a couple of weeks ago when we were chatting to a local historian.
You know, to me, I just have this feel that everybody, particularly in Doctor Who fandom in England, that they all know each other, and that somebody, they're always close. There's a convention every weekend. You guys just have all the fun.
It does. Joking apart, there are a lot of connections over the years. Where partly because if you live anywhere near London, a bit like if you lived anywhere near Cardiff nowadays, if you lived anywhere near London in the 70s or 80s, they were always filming Doctor Who somewhere nearby. So about half a mile down the road is the Nazi secret base in the South American jungle from Silver Nemesis. It's
Really?
just a house on the end of the street, but John Nathan Turner knew it. It looked vaguely South American, and it was an awful lot cheaper to go and film in Worthing, which was only an hour and a half drive from BBC TV Centre, than it was to go to South America. So they put some palm trees in front and a couple of pot plants, and it was South America.
So, and you have a filming location that you can easily access right there close.
The pub from Terra of the Zygons, which is supposed to be in Loch Ness, is about 3 miles down the road.
Wow.
That was my local when I was teaching nearby.
Right. That's really cool. So, you and your family have been providing fun and smiles to the Doctor Who community for a good amount of time now. You know, lots of laughs and grins with Colin the Dalek. And I'm wondering, do you guys happen to be fans of Doctor Who?
I don't know what gave you that clue at all. The reality is, not all of us in the family are. I am and have been since a very small child. But my wife, when I met her, had never seen the show. And so I kind of introduced it to her via Eccleston. We've watched a few of the original sort of classic run together, but she's not so keen on that. But no, she tolerates my passions, understands them, and joins in. She came to a convention this summer and last summer with me and the boys. And my boys, well, Ellis is too young because he's only a year old. And Rory doesn't like the Doctor because the Doctor harms Daleks. And because he's grown up with this one, his view of the Doctor is that the Doctor, and particularly Ace, are horrible. Ace
Really
smashes up Daleks with baseball bats.
Right.
I let Sophie Aldred know this a few years back, and she very kindly filmed an apology for Rory last Christmas.
Oh, really?
Saying that she was very sorry and she promises not to do it again. What I didn't know at the time was that she'd just finished filming Power of the Doctor, where, of course, she does get a baseball bat out again, and she does beat up a Dalek again. So those promises counted for nothing. Nothing at all. We've not had a second apology from her. And we're still
That's
waiting.
hilarious. Sophie Aldred is so awesome. So it is consistent. Ace is always bashing the Daleks with a baseball bat.
Yeah. No, she, as far as Rory's concerned, she's the villain.
It's her.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to ask if you guys do conventions, and you mentioned that you went to one. Do you go to those commonly, and do you take Colin with you?
No, we've not yet. I mean, until very recently, Colin was entombed in the house. When we bought him, And we bought him, not quite in the condition you see him now, but we bought him just before our wedding to add a little bit of Doctor Who to my side of the family, because Laura's got a very large family. I've got quite a small family, so I thought, how can I boost the family numbers up? We'll introduce a Dalek. And when we bought him, it was nice and easy. He came around the side of the house, in through the big doors at the back of the conservatory, and he's lived here ever since. Since then, we've built an extension on the side of the house, and we only now have a path about that wide to get down. So when he came out of the house recently, we had to do a lot of lifting over fences and involving our neighbours in helping him escape. So we've not had a chance for the Dalek to make a convention yet, but I'd attended a few conventions in the 90s, and I liked them a lot because they were very small scale, and you got to chat to the guests afterwards. We went into the sort of green room bit after, and I played charades with John Pertwee and John Nathan Turner, and there was a whole load of actors there who you could just meet and chat with. By the 2000s, when the show came back, it started to become a very big thing again. And so it's lots of convention halls and queues for an hour to get a signature. So I've been reluctant to go to a convention again, but there was one at Oldbourne where they filmed the John Pertwee story, The Demons. And it's a beautifully low-key, small-scale convention, all outside on the village green. And you have a little timetable that says at 11 o'clock, you're going to the square in the middle of the village, and you'll meet John Leeson and Katie Manning. And then at 2 o'clock, you're going to the duck pond, and there'll be Fraser Hines. And you go around in these little groups of about 20 of you, and you can then sit on park benches and chat to them. And it's such a lovely way to do it. And having a young family with me, they can go off running about and playing in the play park, or running around the village green and having a picnic lunch while you get to chat to these people. And so it's a really relaxed and lovely way of doing it. It's an absolutely superb one. Sadly, their last one is this coming June. I think after doing it for about 10 years, the logistics of it and doing it in a small village and it being in the open air and with the British weather has probably meant that they've just gone, that's enough now. Which is a shame. We absolutely loved it. And I took my wife and children both times. Rory cosplayed. He dressed up as a Dalek. He's got his own Colin the Sink Plunger whisk and cardboard box.
I've seen that.
And he was recognised by more people than I realised. I kind of assumed when you post these pictures up that there'll be about 10 or 15 people that will sort of see them and be interested in them. And a lot of people there knew him, so Rory's going, why do people know me here? And I was going, I need to explain that to you at some point.
So did you get to meet, you mentioned John Leeson, Katie Manning, and some others.
Yeah.
Have you met Katie Manning?
Yeah, we have definitely met Katie Manning.
Yeah.
I'll send you through a picture of her and Rory together.
Okay.
There are certain celebrities that you hope are going to be just as lovely as they appear on television. And sometimes over the years, particularly in the 90s when I met quite a lot of Doctor Who actors and actresses, a lot of them lived up to that. Liz Sladen was just as delightful as you would hope that she would be. Sarah Jane, because she was my kind of childhood companion. And others were trickier. I found Anthony Ainley a tricky character to chat to, the 1980s master. He was, a unique individual. But Katie instantly just went full on, darling, and rushed towards Rory, scooped him into her arms and gave him a cuddle, and then walked around the rest of the day with him just holding hands. There was supposed to be a formal photo opportunity, and it ended up with her just tipping him upside down and dangling him by his legs, which he thought was wonderful. And they've kept in touch ever since. So when it was his birthday, a parcel arrived for Rory with a book in that he'd talked about how much he'd loved the earlier books. She'd found the next book in the series. I'd posted it to him.
Wow.
When Ellis was born, we got some little booties from her. I cannot express how delightful she is, and she kind of, it feels like she's sort of an adopted aunt that's just embraced our family in a way that I never thought anybody. When you watch someone on TV, you just go, well, they're doing their job, and 50 years later they probably won't want to talk about their job, because imagine you or I, if we were stopped in the street and they go, you know that job you did 35 years ago for 6 months? Can I talk about it for an hour? We'd go,
Right.
no, that would be really strange. But he and so many of the Doctor Who family absolutely embrace the fans in a way that I don't think any other fandom does.
You know, that is absolutely beautiful. Katie Manning is absolutely awesome. And I've heard so many wonderful things about meeting her. I really hope to be able to do that someday. She's an ambassador of goodwill with Doctor Who. And I've heard Liz Sladen was the same way. Sophie Aldred is the same, Nicola Bryant. And it's really wonderful as an American to hear these stories of being able to meet these celebrities, you know, our Doctor Who icons. And it seems to me that conventions in the US are quite a bit different than the ones in the UK. And what you've described of them being smaller and intimate is absolutely fascinating, because the ones here are rather large. And I think that one of the main differences is there's a tremendous amount of cosplay. And I believe that the cosplay started because of the fact that when we were first able to watch Doctor Who, it came out on PBS, the public television service, which is publicly funded. So during the broadcasts of Doctor Who, they would have fundraisers in the middle where they would have volunteers up on bleachers of phone banks, all answering the phone to take in call-in pledges. That way the American stations could buy more episodes of Doctor Who. And a very large and entertaining part of those call-ins was cosplay, such as you would have, let's say, a Tom Baker part of one of the stories would air for about 20 minutes, and then you would have an hour worth of cosplay fundraisers. And I believe that the American conventions developed that trend of cosplay because of the fundraisers during public broadcasting service. Now, when you mentioned that they used to be a little bit smaller and now that they've gotten a little bit bigger, is there more, or is there a lot of cosplay there now at the British conventions? Or
I can only speak for the contrast between the 90s and these ones at Oldbourne. In the 90s, there was no cosplay at all. I would say minimal. And if it was, it would be screen accurate rather than these wonderfully creative ones where they go, what if? And I love the what if costumes. You know, the what if Colin Baker's costume, he'd gone for another season. So they've got these wonderful blue outfits for him. Or what if the companion had been... so in the 90s, very little at all. And the age mix and the gender, it was largely male, very earnest, very serious. And I was one of those very earnest, very serious young men attending these conventions with my big long list of questions to ask. One of the joys of the show, I think, coming back, is that it kind of democratized fandom a little bit more. I think by the late 90s in particular, there were those of us who watched the show, but then read the Virgin New Adventure books and then the BBC Extended Adventures and then the very early Big Finish ones. We felt we were the fans, and I think it got a little bit insular. And attending Oldbourne, there were people from, I think Ellis was obviously the youngest, he was 9 months old, but the oldest was in his 90s, and there was everything in between. And there were people in costume, there were people not in costume, there were people in most creative outfits where they were being their doctor. And I rather love that as well. I like the idea that anyone can be the doctor. You don't have to be screen accurate. If you embrace the show and its eccentricity and its joy. So I saw people who had embroidered their own one. One lady had a dress on that was Target novel front covers embroidered onto the dress. They were sort of
Wow.
printed and then sewn on. Absolutely stunning. She was basically sort of this dark blue police box blue dress, flared out with all of the Target novels on. And I just thought that was brilliant because the joy she had in making it and sharing it was there. So I felt that one of the things that's changed is that in the 90s, people were desperate to hear from the Doctor Who actors and actresses answers to their questions. And everyone sat in rows and we all listened. And I think what's changed is that now the community has widened and everyone actually wants to meet other people from the community. So it's actually talking to other people about what they've created as well. So where somebody has got amazing artwork, people want to talk to them about what they've produced. And the actors and actresses join in with that. So Katie was taking great delight in looking at crocheted models that somebody had made, the outfits that somebody had had. Colin Baker, who was at the Old Bourne convention 2 years ago, just took sheer joy in seeing so many gentlemen wearing Colin coats. You know, given that in the 90s, if you went to a convention, people would boo you if you were wearing a Colin coat because
Really?
that was awful. We were very serious young men. And unfortunately for an awful lot of us, we hit Colin Baker's era as teenagers, and you're at your most pompous and serious as a Doctor Who teenage fan because you go, well, it's not the show it was when I was watching it as a child. It's become ridiculous now. He looks like a clown. It's like light entertainment and all of these things that fandom became so toxic in the late 90s because we took it so seriously. And now you just go, it's silly, it's fun. And it's just a joy to meet people who take it that way as well.
You know, that's really interesting because there was a lot of tension in the 1990s because Doctor Who wasn't on TV and nobody thought that it was coming back. And from an American perspective, let's take Katie Manning or Colin Baker or Sylvester McCoy, for example. Those were names that back then, it was something that I was certain that's somebody that I would never be able to meet or interact with. I could probably get their autograph if I wrote off to England, but we didn't have the internet, and that was something that seemed 100% impossible to ever interact with the actors behind Doctor Who. And I see what you mean here. I think Twitter may have a bit to do with it. And I think that actually the COVID lockdowns had some silver linings in certain areas. And I'm thinking that that seemed to have been a turning point when everyone became more open and more interactive. I remember seeing Colin Baker was on Twitter. And I immediately thought, wow, I can't believe somebody's impersonating Colin Baker on Twitter until I finally realized, wait a second, I think that actually is him. So it's an amazing day and age we live in because I believe that if I had something to ask him, I could probably ask him on Twitter or X as it's called now. And I believe that I would get a response. And that was something that couldn't even be imagined, at least here in the 1990s.
Certainly during the lockdowns as a primary school teacher, we suddenly had to learn how to do things like Zoom. And the access we suddenly had to experts. So when we were designing lessons and we went, well, if we're doing space, I wonder if we contact Professor Brian Cox, would he do a short intro for us for the lesson? And he did. Wow. John Barrowman very kindly did a design a monster competition for my class. So he popped up on screen and went, hello, Mr. Dobson has set you the challenge this week. And each week we would then, I'd contact people and go, I don't suppose you could spend 2 minutes doing this for me. Peter Capaldi did a lovely introduction for a class assembly that I was planning. And there's no way at all that you'd be able to have got through, if you'd gone to a convention, you'd have had a queue as long as your arm going down to get a signing. You'd have your minutes allocation to chat to someone. And yet, during the lockdowns and because of things like Twitter, people gave up their time and they kept in touch with us. And I agree. I think as we're about to see in November and into the next 2 years, I don't think that would have happened. I don't think Russell T Davies would have returned. I don't think Catherine Tate and David Tennant would be back if it hadn't been for the lockdown watch-alongs. And they're almost a renewal of their passion for it too, and being able to see how much everybody else cared about the show still. There are a lot of things that were challenging during lockdowns for all of us, and it was a very difficult time for a lot of people. But in Doctor Who fandom, as you say, the silver lining was a democratization, I think, of fandom. Again, the gatekeepers couldn't gatekeep. You could contact people directly. Goodness knows what their agents were thinking. They must have despaired sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the agents are still out there. I actually had to go through an agent this morning to try to get a hold of someone that I would like to speak with also, and we'll see what happens with that. But that is true. The gatekeepers were gone, and so as paramount and devastating that the COVID lockdowns were to people, there were those little silver linings, and particularly in Doctor Who. Look at what Emily Cook did. It got all of those people together, providing entertainment and just escapism and joy for people at a time when it was really needed. So
it's Emily really who got us onto Twitter, because although I'd been on a little bit before that, it was during the watch-alongs that Rory and I were at home. I'd be teaching in the mornings online. I'd be going to class to look after key workers sometimes. But Rory and I would then be messing around in this room. And obviously, this thing gets in the way a little bit. So he ended up being in a lot of photos. So we kind of contrived the idea that Colin looks after the children while I'm at work during lockdowns. And Emily retweeted these a lot. And if it hadn't been for her and the watch-alongs, we would still be, I mean, we are still a very niche corner of Doctor Who fandom in a very niche corner of Doctor Who Twitter. But if it hadn't been for her, I don't think many people would have known about it at all.
That's very interesting. And you know what? Now that makes me wonder, because that is back, I hadn't used Twitter until somewhere around that time. And when acquiring the timescales was going to close, it's a review community, and I thought it would be a shame if it closed. And when deciding to keep it open and acquiring it from the person that started it, it had a Twitter feed on the main page, and I actually did not know how to use Twitter, and that forced me to learn how to use it, and it was so enjoyable. And I think it may very well be a retweet that I saw from Emily Cook right when I started getting into Doctor Who Twitter during lockdown, which alerted me to your feed. And I thought, this is so cool and funny. And I subscribed and have been following ever since. And you talk about some fun. Thank you for all of the enjoyment and smiles that you have brought to everyone. It's absolutely incredible.
You're very welcome. I mean, it's more to amuse ourselves. We kind of started it off because my mum was worried that with me working, my wife working during lockdowns, both being teachers, we had to be in school a lot of the time to look after the children of key workers, doctors, nurses, ambulance drivers, and so on, who couldn't have childcare at home. So my mother was sort of going, well, who's going to be looking after Rory? So I posted a few of these photos of Rory having his nappy changed by the Dalek and various things like that, just to worry her more than anything else. And then I thought, someone else might like this. And I was very surprised that more people did. And overwhelmingly, people are positive and respond well. People talk about toxicity in Doctor Who fandom, both in the 90s and nowadays. We've had none of that, apart from one message once, which kind of then got out of hand because I made a mistake of sharing said message and giving oxygen to it, where someone had criticised my son for holding his whisk and his sink plunger in the wrong arms and saying that I was embarrassing Doctor Who fandom. Probably am. But it was. I was rather surprised at the feedback we got from. I mean, we ended up having people like quotes in the newspapers here in the UK about that incident, and people like Neil Gaiman being quoted. in his defense of Rory and his sink plunger and whisk. Mallory Blackman. I mean, these are heroes, literary heroes of mine. And as a primary school teacher, their books are kind of core text. So to suddenly get authors being pulled into this, as I say, very niche corner of Doctor Who fandom was both slightly embarrassing and joyous at the same time.
So Neil Gaiman chimed in.
Yeah, he waded in very quickly on it, and of course, with 3.5 million followers like he does.
Yeah.
This one comment where I'd said, "Oh, look what someone said about my son." I think that's a little bit unfair, or I can't quite remember the wording of it. And he went, "No, he can be if he holds a sink plunger and a whisk, it doesn't matter what hand he holds it in, as long as he says exterminate and means it."
There you go.
Then he's a Dalek. And then Sir Nick Briggs and all of the Dalek operators from over the years all chimed in as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, Neil Gaiman in particular has a very loud voice on Twitter, and it's always positive, good stuff. I enjoy his feed. He had written a foreword for a Doctor Who book, and I had sent a simple tweet that said, "Everybody check this out. It has a foreword by Neil Gaiman," and I put his little handle there, and I had no idea how many followers he had until he retweeted that. And I remember looking at Twitter the next day. I'm like, what? Why does this say that there's 1,000 notifications? he's very loud. So
he's very loud. But
listen,
very loud and positive.
Yeah, loud and positive. That is a perfect way of describing Neil Gaiman on Twitter, or X. I guess we're supposed to get used to calling it X now. But
yeah, at some point.
Listen, I want to interview Colin. I've got some questions from my own kids here, but I have a couple more questions about you. First, if you don't mind, you mentioned that you and your wife are teachers. Are you grade level teachers, college teachers? So if you don't mind me asking.
So over the years, we've taught primary school. So these are children from the ages of 4 up to 11.
Okay.
And my wife and I at various points have been deputy head teachers. I'm currently classroom based, so I teach year 5, which in the UK is, I have to be careful on this, 9 and 10-year-olds. And my wife has just taken on a new role as the special educational needs coordinator in her school. So she's basically the pupil voice for those children who we need to make school more child-shaped from the children school-shaped, to make sure that those kids are supported, that voice is championed, and that the resources are fought for, because they do have to be fought for these days, as they do in any public service.
Okay. Now, switching to Doctor Who here briefly, with you, do you happen to recall the first episode that you ever watched of Doctor Who, and do you happen to have a doctor?
I do remember the episode. My sister was about to be born, so this would have been 1976, and I was staying at a friend's house, and they had a colour TV, and I can now pinpoint exactly when it was, because I remember a whole load of strange women dancing in red robes, and the Doctor with his long scarf lying there looking very confused and puzzled. So it's got to have been Brain and Morbius, because that would have been the Sisterhood of Khan, I think it is.
I believe so, yeah.
And so I've worked out that that's the omnibus repeat of the Sisterhood of the Brain of Morbius that was shown on a Saturday morning sometime in the summer of 1976. It would have been a little bit after that I then was able to watch it at home, because we had a little black and white telly, and I would have been 4 when that was being shown. So I think my parents quite wisely said, well, let's wait a year or 2 more. So I started really watching it when Louise Jameson as Leela was a companion. As far as doctors are concerned, it depends on the mood I'm in. I really got into Doctor Who at the 20th anniversary. I had the Radio Times magazine in the UK that's published each week, telling you, despite it saying the Radio Times, it tells you what's on the television. It's one of those quirks of history. And they did a special which explained everything there was to know about Doctor Who. In these little 1-paragraph notes, it told you about every story. And for the first time, I had in front of me what each story was about, from Hartnell's An Unearthly Child, Tribe of Gum, whatever we call it, if we're allowed to call it anything at the moment or even watch it at the moment, all the way through to the Five Doctors. And it was like my Encyclopedia Britannica. It was the Bible that you'd go to. And that fell apart within that year because I'd be flicking through it. So for me, it would have been Peter Davison, because that was when I was at my my most kind of, I knew everything about it at that point. But if you're in the right mood for it, all of them are brilliant.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it. Now, mentioning Radio Times, that is still being published to this day. In fact, Katie Manning was in it, I believe, last week. She said some really wonderful things about working with John Pertwee and Roger Delgado. So we didn't have the benefit of Radio Times or anything. We had no reference material back in the late 70s and the 80s. An episode would come on, and some of the time PBS didn't even air the title of it. Some of the time the episode would just start at the beginning of the acting. So if you could be lucky enough to see a title, you'd have to write it down. And then it still didn't really mean much in the overall context because there was no reference material as to seasons, doctors, the story names. And in fact, a lot of the times, unfortunately, PBS would air them out of order. So you would take the story Horror of Fang Rock, for example, which I believe is 4 parts. And they may start at part 3 and then go back to part 1. So that was a bit chaotic. and I know that when it ended in 1989, I used to watch with my grandmother. And when Sylvester McCoy's doctor and Sophie Aldred's Ace basically walked off into the sunset, we didn't know that that was the last episode of Doctor Who, or that it was going to be nearly a couple of decades before there was anything else out. So what I'm wondering is, when the series ended in 1989, what did you do during the wilderness years?
We were lucky, really, here in the UK, in that there was only a couple of months before, I think maybe it'd been a year, until the New Adventures, the Virgin series of novels. So between those periods, I think the first of the VHS videotapes were coming out as well. So you could start to watch the old ones. Because although the BBC and being in the UK, we had the huge advantage that we were watching them in the correct order and the new ones as they were new, we didn't get to see any of the old ones. I think the only time we got to see them would have been for the 20th anniversary, where they did a run called The Five Faces of Doctor Who. And that was the first time that I'd have seen Hartnell or Troughton or Pertwee at all. That point in 1983 was the first time that had been repeated since they were shown. Now, I didn't know at the time that's because they hardly had any of them in the archive to be able to show. You kind of assumed that they were all there. So one of the things that was quite fun in the late 80s, early 90s was the emergence of satellite broadcasting. So there started to be companies who would show old episodes. So I think there's the Galaxy Channel was one of the first ones. Someone will correct me, I'm sure, online on that. And then UK Gold. So we suddenly actually, in that period where the show had stopped, we suddenly got a lot more Doctor Who than we'd ever had. We got the VHS tapes, we got new books that were taking it in new directions. Big Finish at that point weren't Big Finish, they were
audio visuals. It was called, they were originally called the audio visuals.
Yeah, and I got hold of a couple of their tapes as well, where Nick Briggs was playing the Doctor, and thought, this is really interesting. And for me, it actually widened the show so much more than the TV product. So in a weird way, it's kind of like one of those ring donuts where there was nothing in the middle because the show wasn't being made, but everything around it was wonderful and really delicious. You know, it was, you know, we had new audio, we had new visual, we had new books, and there was always the hope that it might come back.
Right.
And the convention scene was really starting to grow. So in a weird way, I think we call it the wilderness years now. The wilderness years would imply nothing happened at all. But I think there was more creativity then than there was after it or before. And a lot of people that were involved in that creativity then, of course, went on to make the show. So the writers of those new adventure novels, you know, Paul Cornell and others wrote for the show. You know, Russell T Davies wrote one of the books. And you know, so in many ways it was a training ground and a richer period than when the show was on. Not to say I wasn't very happy when it came back, both with McGann and with Eccleston, but it certainly wasn't wilderness.
Right. You know, that's you just touched on what I was going to ask you next. Were you excited when the 1996 American Canadian TV film came out? And how did you? How did you feel about it?
We had a very strange situation where, probably because of BBC Enterprises, they wanted to release the videotape of it a week before it was broadcast, or 2 weeks before it was broadcast. Because in America you got to watch it. Then in Britain it was released on videotape about 2 weeks before it went on telly.
Oh, really?
But there was a delay. They had to cut the videotape. And again, someone will probably correct me online for this, but the shooting at the start and the gangland violence, sadly, there'd been a shooting in the UK. And that's a very rare thing in the UK, for there to be a shooting. And so the BBC decided they were going to trim that bit off the release, both for the TV broadcast and for the video. So there was a delay in releasing the videotapes. And so all of the retailers were going to do a midnight Doctor Who, go and buy your videotape. And in the end, it was about 3 weeks later. And
wow.
I cycled down to the shop, got my copy, cycled back, sat down, popped it in. And I loved it. It was very interesting, though, my wife's experience of watching it only a couple of last year. Having watched Eccleston and the new run, she watched this one and went, it says, it's on the planet Gallifrey, my old enemy, the Master was blah, blah, blah. Oh, sorry, on the planet Skaro. She's going, stop. She goes, what's Skaro? Who's the Master? What's Gallifrey? Why am I being told all of this? Why can't I learn this? And you realize how good Russell T Davies was at slowly introducing over the course of a season all the key elements of what Doctor Who is. Whereas the McGann one, for all of its wonderfulness with McGann, basically does an info dump in the first 3 minutes in voiceover saying, right, you need to know all of this before you're going to be able to enjoy this program. And she just went, no. I'm not going to watch the rest of it. She eventually did and enjoyed it. But for me, I loved it. And I had no problem at all with it being American, Canadian. It still felt Doctor Who to me. And viewing it now, all these years later, it has so many elements of the new show in it. The suggested romance with companions, the energy that McGann gave it. That lovely scene with his shoes, where he sort of, and he's just got that mind that flits from one thing to another. And I thought that captured it beautifully. And yeah, I was convinced we were going to get a full run, and then nothing happened.
Right. And then it would be almost 9 years later. I believe it was announced in 2004 that Doctor Who was going to be coming back. Were you watching Rose live when it came back in its new form?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I was living on my own at the time, and everyone who knew me had very, very strict instructions not to knock on the door, not to phone, nothing. Literally, if I could have put a cordon up at the end of my road to stop anybody from to. So inevitably, what I got in the first 3 minutes of it being broadcast were 15 people trying to phone me, text me, just to annoy me. I discovered afterwards there's about 10 of my friends who were going to go and knock on the door and bang on the window. Fortunately, they knew me well enough to know that I would have found that less funny than them. So yeah, I watched it live, and I can still remember the BBC's intro to it and the tap dance. The BBC had some very strange idents at that point. They'd moved on from the globe that you see on a lot of the Blu-ray releases for continuity to sort of dancing people in the street and things like that. And even now, hearing that BBC intro music to the start of Rose is just brilliant. But yeah, we watched it live and got Graham Norton talking over the first bit of it, just as Eccleston goes down into the basement of the shopping centre that Rose is working in. There came a live feed from a TV show earlier in the evening, and Graham Norton talks over a whole sequence.
Oh,
and so any of us who were watching it live just went, "What's going on?" In the novel that Russell T Davies did of his own adaptation, Norton appears in it on the radio. So there's a bit where Rose is going down the corridor and she goes, "Oh, she can hear an Irish TV presenter gabbling away." So it's lovely, you know, so it's little bits like that you won't get on the Blu-ray release or the DVD release because that was live. So no one kind of recorded that feed coming through other than all of us who were very earnestly there with our DVD recorders or video players recording this, so the BBC can't lose it.
Right. Yeah, we don't want them losing anything else.
No, we've lost enough of that.
Yeah, that's funny. I've never heard that story about Graham Norton over speaking it. You know, I know that currently, as of today, when new episodes come out, I know that an announcer will overspeak at the end of it.
This was about 3-4 minutes into it. I mean, Norton, unfortunately for him, popped up in a Matt Smith one as well. About 4 years later, 5 years later.
They need to just put him in the show.
I would imagine he's been asked. He must have been asked. And if he's not in this new run with Russell T Davies, I'll be astonished because I think he will just put it in as an in-joke. But he'll be on the telly or something like that. So watch out in November and see.
Do you think? Look for the Graham Norton Easter egg.
I think so. He's popped up twice already. He popped up as an animated thing. You know, a lot of American shows, in order to keep viewers there, they will tell you what's coming up next, even while the previous episode is on. There'll be this little caption running along the bottom. And the BBC, for about 3 weeks, decided they were going to do that too. So at the end of this Matt Smith episode, where it's all very dramatic and he's about to fire a gun up into the roof of a building because the angels are coming towards him, then a little animated Graham Norton pops up on the screen and goes, "Oh, I'm coming up later." And you think, that's not terribly helpful, and it kind of kills the atmosphere. So yeah, the poor man has appeared twice without knowing it.
Okay, so are you excited about the upcoming specials with Russell T Davies, who has been coined by some brilliant fan as RTD2?
Oh yeah, no, I'm very. Yeah. I know it's a brilliant caption for him. I am. I think I'm most looking forward to it for not for Tennant or for Tate, but for Bernard Cribbins.
Oh
because for those of us in the UK, and anyone who actually has watched Doctor Who as well, you know how brilliant he is and how warm and emotional any of his scenes are and how real they feel. And I'm not sure how much he's going to be in it, but I know that they are going to use footage of him. And I'm most excited. I know that sounds daft because, you know, the show's back and it's going to be potentially bigger and better. And that's not to take anything away from Jodie Whittaker's run, because I really enjoyed that. But certainly the money is there and it's on screen. But the idea that Bernard comes back one last time is brilliant, because when you're talking about people that impress you or go beyond how you'd expect them to be, I was lucky enough to meet Bernard a couple of times over the years.
Oh wow!
And he couldn't have been more delightful. I mentioned before, I'm a primary school teacher, and one of the things that I did to get kids into IT and filmmaking was I gave them all pieces of music that they had to make pop videos out of. And one that I gave one group of kids was Bernard Cribbins' 1960s song, Right Said Fred, which is all about a removal company moving a piano. So the lyrics of it pretty much tell the kids how to direct their video. Yeah, so like take off all the handles and the thing that removes, that holds the candles, all of that stuff's there. So they have to just storyboard that and make it. And it's a nice little film that we'd made. And I was at not at a Doctor Who convention, but a meeting for fans. And there was a friend of mine who was a big fan of the Carry On films. These were a sequence of 30-odd films in the UK from the early 60s, late 50s, all the way through to the late 70s. They were kind of slapstick, innuendo-laden films that have dated quite badly now, but at the time were a staple of any kids' bank holiday Monday. The BBC would always put them on, and Cribbins was in quite a few of these. and was the lead in one of them. So he was at this convention, and a friend of mine went, "Do you fancy coming along to it?" And I went, "Who's going?" And he listed these names. I went, "Oh, okay, yeah." And he went on Bernard Cribbins. I went, "I'm coming," because anybody who grew up in the 70s and 80s in the UK, as James Hogg was saying the other week when you were talking to him about Cribbins, to him, he's kind of like the uncle that all of us had. He was a voice of the Wombles, Jackanory, and he was just about to go into Doctor Who at this point. So I met him, and I sort of handed him very nervously this DVD that the kids had made, and said, "Oh, if you get time, I don't know if you'd want to watch this." And he went, "Well, what is it?" And I explained. He went, "Right, before you go, I need some information." He goes, "What's the name of your school? And what are the name of the children in it?" And I gave him this information and wrote it all down. And I thought, "Oh, that's really kind of him to have asked and taken that interest." And about 3 weeks later, this huge box arrived at our school from the BBC. And in it were autographs, Doctor Who gifts, some sonic screwdrivers, some figures, a whole load of stuff to do with Doctor Who, and individual envelopes with the kids' names on. And every single one of them was a handwritten letter from Bernard Cribbins to them, saying how much he'd loved their video. And it was all about, quite rightly, all about the kids. I mean, I got a nice little card as well, just saying that it was a super DVD, thank you very much, which I thought was really lovely too. But these children had received these handwritten letters from this icon. And he didn't have to do that at all. He could have just taken the DVD and gone, "Oh yeah, cheers." And he could have popped it in the car and handed it to a publicist and go, "Just get rid of that." He'd taken the time to sit down and watch it, and to write to all these kids and said, "Look, if I ever re-release this song, that's the video I'd use." And these kids went home 10 foot tall. 10 foot tall. They've got this from Bernard. It's so lovely. So lovely.
That is absolutely beautiful. You know, I have heard him referred to as a national treasure more than once.
Oh yeah. It was weirdly, it was one of those things where you talk to quite a lot of people. I was on holiday in Portugal when Cribbins passed away last year. And my mood that whole day was much lower. My wife has always said that, you know, when Cribbins goes, you know, you're going to need a bit of TLC, because I've always talked about him, you know, so it's quite emotionally. And, you know, I challenge any Doctor Who fan to watch that little bit where he's saying goodbye to the Doctor in the church after Catherine Tate's wedding, at the end where he's sort of saluting him off, not to be moved by him. And if you watch things like The Railway Children, it's his, you believe him, you believe his emotions, they're there. And because we've all grown up with him, you know, he's one of the first, you know, I remember, you know, we talked about that black and white telly we had. First program I watched, The Wombles. The first voice I heard on television, Bernard Cribbins.
Bernard Cribbins. Wow.
So being able to see him again this November, hopefully, is going to be wonderful.
Okay, absolutely beautiful. One last question about Doctor Who here. How do you feel about the new upcoming Ncuti Gatwa era?
Yeah, you know, lots of people say, "Oh yes, well I've watched him a lot already, and I always thought he'd be an excellent Doctor Who." I'd not even heard of him, I'm afraid. Then I watched some of the shows he's been in. Watched Sex Education. He did a bit for the coronation. For the King's coronation earlier in the year. He was doing a bit of Shakespeare there. What an actor. What whoever decided to cast him and saw that potential in him has got the same skill as anybody who watched Tom Baker and went, "That's him." There are plenty of people who can play the Doctor. And everyone who's done it has done it well. But it's the casting directors who should get the credit for that. And I think we're in for a real treat. I really do. The only problem I've got is that if I ever wanted to cosplay, there's this one outfit he had, which was kind of tweeds with an orange polo shirt. He looked stunning in it.
Yep.
If I did it, I don't know if you remember the film The Wicker Man.
Yes, in fact, author John Walsh is releasing a book on The Wicker Man here this week.
If you have a look at Christopher Lee's outfit in that, it's identical. It's the orange polo shirt,
really?
Shirt, the tweed jacket. So far from looking cool and stylish like Ncuti, I'd end up looking like a rather disheveled version of Christopher Lee. So I'm not sure I would ever be able to pull off any of those outfits that he does so well. I'm a white middle-aged man. I'm not going to be able to do that well.
Right,
But
right.
I'm
And
very glad
he has a lot of outfits. And I've seen the speculation of people wondering, is the Doctor going to have a different outfit in every episode? And will the companions, and thinking back about that, that's one thing that I thought was odd when I first started watching Doctor Who, that was for a whole season they were all wearing the same clothes. So it
not
kind
even
of
comfortable clothes. If you look at someone like Tina,
right.
to remind you that she was an airline stewardess, she stayed as an airline stewardess for months.
Yes.
The logistics of that was that she would go into the TARDIS, she'd go to her lovely bedroom, and we saw the bedroom a few times, and go, do you know what, this morning I'm going to put on my airline stewardess outfit again in the hope that I'm going to get back to Gatwick or Heathrow or wherever it was that she's supposed to get to every day.
Yeah.
And and not to think, every time we exit this TARDIS, we're running. Maybe I could put trainers on, or maybe
There you go.
or it's a bit cold, put a coat on. No, she had to wear her airline stewardess outfit all the time.
Right.
And Patrick was in pajamas. That's an odd choice. I know he was an odd boy, but that's an odd choice.
You had mentioned the audio visuals earlier, which was the fan-made predecessor. Well, I don't want to say predecessor. It was before Big Finish. A lot of the people that were involved in creating the audio visuals, fan-produced audio adventures, moved on to create Big Finish. And Nigel Fairs is one person that was involved in it, an absolutely wonderful gentleman that I had an opportunity of speaking with once. Yet there's that other one, Nicholas Briggs, who is currently the I've never spoken with him or met him. I would love to one day. He is currently the voice of the Daleks on television. And he, I believe, built his own ring modulator in order to do a Dalek voice. With Colin the House Dalek and his fame, have you happened to have heard anything from Nicholas Briggs about it?
When we had the whole sink plunger whisk in the wrong hand bit, he did write a lovely sort of message underneath the original comments.
Right.
Other than that, no, I've not been to a convention where we've had a chance to meet, because he's not been to Aldbourne at all. I would love to meet him. I've kind of admired his work and his passion for Doctor Who, which now goes back 30 odd years, because he also did the interview, VHS interviews with cast for Bill Baggs. I think it was Bill Baggs.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Or Keith Barnfield. It may have been Keith's work, but basically they did a series as well. So I've watched him since he had hair, and I've watched as he and I have slowly. I'm not far behind him now, but it is one of those things where you sort of watch somebody, sort of aging as you do yourself, and a magnificent gentleman, and. But I'd love to meet him. I'd love to meet him and chat about his own experiences with Daleks.
Well, maybe you should tweet to him, say, "Hi, Nick Briggs, I've known you since you had hair." Or no, I take that back, because he is not Nick. He is not Nick. Did you pick up on that on the television episode where the Dalek screamed, "I am not Nick"?
Yes, a lovely little reference, wasn't it?
that was great. So okay, before we wrap up here, we're running on that hour I asked you for. So let me take us out here. But I wanted and stick around, okay? Hang tight with me, because there's something else I wanted to ask you. I saw a photo of Colin. You had tweeted a photo of Colin out for a walk in the public. And I'm wondering, now you mentioned that he is entombed, which I guess a Dalek That's a good
He's very
place
much
for a
in
Dalek
character.
to be, is entombed. Yeah, but it is taking him out or even getting him out when possible. Is that something you do very often? And when you do, what kind of reactions do you get from people?
Well, the first time he was out with us was at our wedding. So he came to our wedding reception. He wasn't involved in the main proceedings. He didn't carry the ring down the aisle or anything like that for me. But that was the first time, and he sort of sat quietly in the corner for most of the wedding. And then I decided to get him on the dance floor. And my wife's reaction was, "Oh God, Andy's going to be furious. Someone's wheeled him onto the dance floor," and then realised that I was actually inside operating him. Everyone there simply just went, "Yeah, of course, it's Andy and a Dalek. Of course, that's exactly what he would do." What surprised me when we went down recently, so we got the Dalek out of the house in bits. He comes in 3 bits, so there's the top bit, middle bit, bottom bit there. And with the help of a very good friend of ours, Jack Reeves, who does the Doctor Who Community Show YouTube channel, he came down for the day with his wife, and we lifted Colin over the fence out into the street, and in a very complex kind of cross between Jenga and Tetris, we managed to get him into the boot of my car and into the back seat and the front seat in bits. So it looked like I was driving with him next to me as a passenger. Backside was out the back. We parked up at the end of quite a bit of Worthing seafront. As I say, Worthing's a relatively sleepy community. Rather wonderful disabled access, though, because there's an awful lot of elderly and retireds. It's ideal for Daleks. And so you can get them up ramps. I mean, if you're going to invade Earth, I never understood why they invaded London. Invade all of the retirement communities in Britain, because you can go up the ramps, through the doors, they're all wide enough for a Dalek, and you'd meet very little resistance either. So we got him up onto the beach, up onto the seafront, onto the promenade, and I was fully expecting lots of people to go. But they saw Rory, my little boy, running along with him, and they all waved. What surprised me most were the amount of people who stopped us, who said they'd been involved in the show. So
really?
we were stopped by a woman who went, "Oh, we used to live next to the man who made the title sequence to Doctor Who. You know, the one that Tom Baker has." I was going, yes. So that was. She goes, "Oh yeah, he used to live down our street. He had a Dalek as well." Like, okay. We were stopped by one elderly man who'd been a member of the Royal Grenadier Guards, and he'd been roped in by in the early 70s as an extra for unit, because the director at that time despaired at all these actors holding the guns in the wrong direction and just went, "We need real soldiers." So he called his mates in, because it was Douglas Camfield, and he called his mates in who'd been in the army with him, and they all appeared in this episode. The British Army released them for the day to film. So he'd been in something like 20 episodes of Doctor Who, uncredited as far as I can gather. But yeah, he's so. Wow. Another lady went, "Oh, my brother was involved with the KLF," and I don't know if you remember the KLF, the pop group, who they did a chart re-release remix of the Doctor Who theme tune called "Doctor in the TARDIS."
Yep.
And that got to #1 in the UK. But in it, there's a cardboard box that looks like a Dalek. Her brother was the operator of the Dalek.
Wow.
So far from people going, "That's really weird, you've got a Dalek on the seafront," people just wanted to stop us to tell us their Doctor Who stories. One lady in her 80s went, "Oh, I used to be terrified of the Daleks. I used to hide behind the sofa." And I thought, you would have been 20, because it's the 60th anniversary.
Right.
You weren't a little girl. You know?
It's supposed to be the kids hiding behind the sofa.
Yeah, that's right. Although I've never found out. I mean, they always talk about the sofa, you know, we used to hide behind the sofa. I've never lived in a house big enough that I could get my sofa off the wall with enough space behind it for the kids to hide behind. So these must have been very, very big houses that these people have these sofas in. But yeah, so we had lots and lots of people talk to us about it. Big groups of lads, you know, sort of, they'd had a drink at the pub already, kind of, you know, and this was Sunday morning early on, stopping and go, "Can we have a selfie, please?" And they had their selfie. The police came along in a car, slowed down, looked out. pulled up. Excuse me, sir. Can we have a photo? And they took a photo too. So there was all these people who just wanted to have a selfie with the Dalek.
That's absolutely awesome. Let me ask you about the technical details of this Dalek, such as where was it made? How does it work?
Okay, so the Dalek itself, our one, has its origins, according to the guys at Dalek 6388, which if you've not been on their website, is just a brilliant resource for Dalek history. They say that it's part of what's called a Necros Dalek. So the Necros Daleks were the ones that were designed originally for Colin Baker's Dalek story, and then into Sylvester McCoy's run. So this is kind of a replica of the whatever the Supreme Dalek in the McCoy story. Certainly its color scheme is that. It's taken originally from a mold from one of those original props. So this isn't an original. This is just a fiberglass one. He's got a fiberglass top to him. It's a wooden bit here, a camera lens and a tiddlywink for the eye, because he came without these bits. We got him from, of all places, eBay. You know, like when you're
really
looking through eBay at night and you're going, do you know what, I fancy a Dalek. I wonder if they do. And sure enough, so we were lucky enough to find that he was living nearby in a garage of an elderly man who wasn't able to look after him anymore. And a bit like when dogs go to the sort of the dog pound, the Dalek was very much close to ending up in this sort of the home for sad Daleks. So we took pity on him and showed him mercy, and we bought him. And then I had the logistical nightmare of getting him home, because you suddenly realize you bought a Dalek, and fortunately he only lived about 3 miles away from where we live. So I was able to put a shout out on my friends' Facebook feeds and say, has anyone got a car that could sort of fit something Dalek size in it?
Something Dalek sized.
And everyone went, you've bought a Dalek, haven't you? And I went, and he was in reasonable condition, but we've repaired his slats. We've done a new eye bit here. He's had a different sink plunger because my boys have a habit of, Rory, as he was learning to walk, and now Ellis, as he's learning to walk, tend to use the sink plunger to hold on to, and it tends to sort of expand and fall off or start to droop. So we've done a few repairs there. So he's got fiberglass top here, wooden slats here, wooden bits around here. The rest of it's fiberglass. And the sort of semicircle bits here are bolted onto the outside. They've clearly had other lives. As the paint's got scratched on them, you can see that they're the blue of a Hartnell Dalek underneath. So whoever had this Dalek before us, this might not have been his original colors. He's called Colin because the old guy that sold it to us, just as we were taking out his garage, just whispered really quietly and waved and went, "Goodbye, Colin."
Oh, wow.
And so we thought we're going to have to keep him as Colin the Dalek. So that's why he is. It's because the gentleman who owned him before us, and we kind of wanted to honour that because it clearly meant a lot to him. Since then, we put a bench in and wheels, so you can get inside and climb about in him. And with the guys at the Dalek Builders forum very kindly make voice boxes, ring modulators for Daleks. Pretty much at parts price. They assemble them all for people who are on a waiting list. And there's a lot of people on the Dalek voice box waiting list. And about 3 or 4 months later, a voice box arrived. And so I've rigged that up to the indicator lights up there, which I had to do a bit of research on to find that they were Mini, the Austin Mini, or by this point, the British Leyland Mini car. They're the indicator lights from the 1988 Mini. So I had to go onto the Mini club owners website, say, does anyone still make the bulbs and the fixings for these? And they're going, yeah, what Mini have you got? And I went, I'll send you a picture of my Mini. And then they went, of course we can help. We get a lot of inquiries. It turns out there's an awful lot of us who go on invade Mini fan websites asking about Daleks. But very few Mini drivers go onto Doctor Who websites and ask questions about Minis.
Andy, is so nice to meet you, and thank you for your time.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah. And for anyone that's watched and enjoyed this, do yourself a favor and go over to Twitter, now known as X for the present, and check out the account of the Dobson family and Colin the Dalek, and follow, and you will find something that you will love. Andy, stick around here. Everybody, take a look, do enjoy, and Andy, have a nice evening.
Thank you very much indeed. Take care.
You too, sir.